Testing. I still haven't recovered my voice here. I still haven't recovered my voice here. I still haven't recovered my voice here. I still haven't recovered my voice. I just want to do a little bit of JavaScript for today. And I've already created a repository from where I'll be pushing some of the exercises that we'll be doing here. So let me just clone that. And I'm just going to try to go inside of that directory so that whatever changes that we'll be doing, I'll be pushing it there, so at least you can try to check that out. Let's have some markdown here. Intro to JavaScript. So I'll be putting some notes here later on. So the first thing that I just want to talk about here is the runtime environment from where you can run JavaScript. So basically, JavaScript is if we try to search it on the web and we ask ourselves, what is JavaScript in general, right? What is JavaScript? It tells us that it's a core technology for the World Wide Web, together with HTML, CSS. So we do know that HTML is for semantics. CSS is for aesthetics. And JavaScript, in terms of the web development industry, is for dynamic behavior, right? Dynamic behavior. I think we should just list here. Okay. So when we talk about JavaScript, that will be providing us a way for us to have dynamic behavior. And there are some runtime environments from where you can try to use JavaScript. Just one thing to take note of, if you're learning programming, one of the things that you have to consider here is that it's like you learning a programming language is like you learning a new language. Okay. Let's say in English, the only difference between a programming language and a human language is that, for example, English, the other person will try to comprehend what you are trying to tell them, even if you are making some grammatical, is this correct? Let me just double check my grammar here. Grammatical error. Yep, that should be double M. So as a person, you're talking to another computer, or you're talking to another person. Another person will try to understand whatever you're trying to explain to them, right? However, with computers, you need to be really precise, because if you make a mistake with the instructions that you are giving the computer will not understand. So we do have some different types of errors technically you will encounter certain situations from where you will run into an error if you make a mistake in the instructions that you provide to the computer. So that can, some types of errors in programming are the following. It's syntax errors. We have runtime environment errors. And we also have logic errors, right? So syntax errors can be a simple semicolon that you made a mistake with. Runtime environment errors will be provided by the runtime environment. Let's say, for example, you're using Node. So by the way, guys, I'll be showcasing some of the examples here through the use of Node. And I'll be using two runtime environments. That will be Node and the browser. Okay, so that means if we open up a browser like this one and I inspect element, we can check out some things that we will be working on the console here, especially for debugging. So now let's try to go and if you're not familiar with Node, let's try to open up where you can try to install that. So let's have Node. So you would see here it's an open source cross-platform environment that can run on Windows, Linux, Unix, and more. It's a backend JavaScript runtime environment, as we mentioned, and it runs on the V8 JavaScript engine that will be executing JavaScript code outside the web browser. So let's say I run here console.log hello world. You'll see we are able to display that hello world. Sorry, let's do that again. I just pressed the up arrow key on my keyboard for me to view the history of my Node terminal here. So now we have that hello world on our, and we're able to access this object and this log method that is providing us a way to display output on our terminal. Okay, so those are just some things to take note of here, and we can also do that on the browser setup. So if I go to my browser Firefox here, I'm using Firefox, but we can try to transition from Firefox, Chrome, and some other browsers. Console.log hello world. This is my first JavaScript, or let's say this is my journey to learning JavaScript. Okay, so we're able to print it out on our hello world. Our hello world with some text here is being printed out on our console using this object that we are trying to access the property that contains a string literal and a function invocation operator that will be invoking for us to be able to output a string of text on our console. Okay, so you will know if Node is, if we are in the Node terminal here, we can Control C here, double time or twice for us to get out of there. And if you're not familiar yet with some commands in the terminal, just take note, you have to be in the directory from where you are right now. I maximize the use of CD to move to that directory, if I wanted to go to the parent directory, which is a Twitch folder that I've created, I just use change directory cd dot dot, right? Then if I want to go back to that clone directory, I just need to go here and do cd or change directory, then the path from where I would want to go to. And in my case, this is the rodprogramdev-pintigLaro basics folder that I've created. So let's try to, I have the dots cleared, runtime environment, and I have the dots cleared, runtime environment here, and so let's have some examples here. So we know, guys, that let's have first our first.js here. So JavaScript will be ending with the .js file extension. And just have in mind, in computer science, we do have some data that we need to work with. And it has to be meaningful to the computer. And JavaScript will be providing us with a number of data types. So as we move forward with our exercises here, we will be learning those data types. We can also perform, so some of the things, let me just put some comments here. Computer science in general will be working with, let's have our readMD here. Let's create our first.js file. Okay. Let's talk about computer science. Computer science is anything or is related to data that is going to be meaningful to the computer, right? And we do have what we call data types. So we'll run through some of those as we move forward with our some things that we would want to tackle are data types. We'll also cover how we can differentiate between numbers, or let's say conditionals. So we'll work on some conditionals in our exercises for today. And we'll be learning some of the basics. Sorry, let's first have, I think it's better that let's have this as 3 here. We'll run through some basic syntax of JavaScript. We'll talk about data types, conditionals, we'll talk about JS variables. How do we declare variables in? So let's first try to have some of this. So for the basic syntax of JavaScript, let's try to work on, so you'll see in JavaScript we have what we call multi-line comments. Let's first tackle comments, right? Multi-line comment. So this means this is the second line of a multi-line comment. This is the third line. So just I'm going to start from the very basic here, guys. So at least our discussion here will be focused on the very basics of JavaScript. And we also can create single line comments using the double forward slash. This is another single line comment. And comments are very useful, especially if you want to. This will not be read by the JavaScript compiler, and it will just be a good way for you to take note of what's happening in your program. And it will also be providing other developers that you're working with an idea on how you wrote your program. That's the good thing about comments. It will be providing you, when you go back to your code, a way to understand how you learned or how you were able to write your code. So let's have a very simple example here that we can try to work on. Let's say I would want to create here a simple script that will be containing some. Let's first try to create first.html. Let's have, we know that JavaScript will be in combination with HTML, right? And as I've mentioned earlier, first JavaScript example, okay? As I mentioned earlier, we can try to utilize here a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And JavaScript will be providing us with some dynamic behavior. So let's have an H1 here. If you're not yet familiar with HTML, that's perfectly okay. I would basically suggest that you try to understand HTML. But we'll try to work on learning some markup language using HTML5 as we try to also work on some of the projects that we'll be working on for our exercises in JavaScript. So let's have here, this is just a heading 1, and if I try to open this up on my browser, just open that up, you would see na, if we try to inspect element, we have that H1. We don't have any content yet, so we'll need to work on writing some markup, but there are already some template that has been created for us by our browser here, which is I'm using Firefox developer version. Let's have this. And let's have that browser also in here, just to at least have some. From time to time, we can try to open the two here, right? So if I minimize this, it's going to be easy for us to go back there. Okay, so let's have my first JavaScript example. Okay, let's have a button here from where we will be. Let's add a type attribute. I'm using Visual Studio Code, and it provides us a lot of features for IntelliSense that will be providing us some code snippets that will make our coding a lot easier. So we'll be doing some inline JavaScript. You can write JavaScript on HTML, on an HTML markup using inline attributes that is accessible through the HTML element that you will be working on. So in this case, we would want to access the document here, the whole document that we have here, which is the HTML file, and we would want to have access to its properties, and we'll be using the document the document object. As you can see, we have a lot of. If we go back here, let's see. In Node, basically, okay, so that's not possible in the Node runtime environment. Just wanted to testing out here. So let's have In the browser, we have what we call the document object model. And this is the property accessory operator from where we can try to go and work on. And what we can do here is to access some properties. And we can get a method here. A method is just simply a function that is built in the JavaScript language. So we want to get that get element by ID, and we use the function invocation operator. So we'll talk more about some different operators as we move along with our discussions here. Let's have some element content. Click me to display date and time. And let's have inside of this, let's reference a paragraph element that will have an ID of JS demo. Okay, so a paragraph element here, empty paragraph element, so we won't have any element content inside of it. Let's have an ID and let's call that JS demo. So this is going to be a reference to whatever we want to do on our document, on our HTML here. We want to display and use a built-in native object, the date object in our case. So we'll use inner HTML, and we want to use this date constructor. So we'll talk about constructors as we move forward. Let's just have this here. And now we should have a button. And if we try to go to our, so we have that click me to display date and time. This should be already, if we did not make any mistake, this should already be making us a way, or providing us a way to make dynamic behavior. So we have an empty element. We know that there's that empty element. If we try to again go here and try to look for our paragraph element, there it is, but it's hidden, right? We're not seeing it there. So if we try to click this, now we are able to access this date object that we have here, and it's providing us this date today, which is March 16, the year, and time here, it's GMT, China Standard Time. So that's our first example here for our, I hope you got the idea on how we can try to work with JavaScript here. So the good thing about learning this JavaScript is that if you're going to be working with, so why do we want to study JavaScript? Okay, let's put that here. Why study JS? First is that we will be needing let's say we, as I've mentioned, we will need, I think this is much better to be here. We will need 3 languages if you are aiming to become a web developer. The very basic languages that you need to learn are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML is for semantics, that will be defining the content of your web pages, especially for SEOs. You want to provide clear instructions what will be the content of your document. And CSS will be for aesthetics, that will be for the layout, providing you a way to create and display layout of your web pages. And again, as I mentioned, this will be providing you to program. It allows JS will allow you to program the behavior of your web pages. Okay, so those are just some of the things that you will be needing as a web developer. Some of the very basics. So let's commit this. Git add all, git commit -m, add introduction, intro, and first JS example. And I'm going to push this. Just make sure that you're in the correct directory when you're pushing, so that once we try to go check our, perhaps I'll be GitHub repository here. We can see that there's the example that we've created. And if you want to go check it out as a reference for you, that will be easy for you to be able to access, right? Now let's try to go and work with some more examples here. Let me just go get some files that I've already created. So when we talk about dynamic behavior, let's have another example. I just want to get some icons that I already have here. Let me just drag some files here. And I'm just going to uncom. Let me go to my, where did I put this directory? Set my Twitch folder here. I'm just going to unzip that here. Okay, so we now have some lights off here, on or off. Information here. So let's have actually have some icons that I've created. You'll see we have 2 icons here. So I'm just going to copy that. Perhaps I'll create a, I won't, let's go put that here, images. Then I'm just going to copy those icons, so this it will be easy for us to go here, and we have another one here. So let's start to create. So we have our first HTML here. Let's have or we can just use it here, right? Let's just utilize this first .html file here. Let's have a second, just to separate whatever we're doing here. Let's I'll want to open that up. So if you're wondering what I'm using here, I'm using live server. So just go to the extension, and these are some of, I have my live server. If you try to, this is the one that I'm using, the one with Ritwik Day. Okay, so you'll be finding it there. You can install it in your Anapono. So I think I don't need this folder anymore. Let's delete this. I think that's not going to work. And also this zip file here. Let's just at least have, now have our images. And one other way for you to create markup using Emmet abbreviations, just use the exclamation mark here, it will be providing you a way to it will be providing you here for second creating an HTML5 template, right? So second, let's have second example, just to showcase some. Just don't worry too much for now. In the meantime here, don't worry too much about what we are trying to do here. Let's say if you're not understanding it first, that's perfectly okay. The more you use the language, the more you'll get to be familiarized on how whatever is happening here right now. So the first thing here is to make it work first. And I would really highly recommend that you try to code along. If you're learning a new programming language, I like to start from scratch. When I'm watching tutorials, I really prefer when I'm following along and I'm coding along. It might take me a little bit longer, especially if, for example, we're having some discussions. But I really do prefer that kind of learning process because I get to see what's happening while we're building the exercises that we have here. So just expect that that's going to be the approach that I'll be doing in trying to work with some of the examples that we have here for our JS exercises, okay? So now we have our seconds.html, and what I want to do here is to create some markup first. And what we want to do is try to have first, we can change HTML content. That's what we did here, right? We tried to replace this empty element and we inserted this date object. That's why in our my first JavaScript example, we were able to click and display the current time. And we can also change, let's say we would want to have some information. Let's just copy this in our second.html here. But instead of having a date object inside of our paragraph here, let's say we can change my second JavaScript example. We can say that here we can change HTML content with the use of JavaScript. So that means if we try to go and try to replace this, so you will see it's telling us that there's something wrong with our code. Let's first try to open that. So we have our click me to display. I don't want this. Click me to change the HTML content of our first paragraph. Let's just have that way. And what we want to target here is to have we would want to specify here I'm using single quotes because we have double quotes. We use double quotes to nest whatever inline script that we are writing inside of our button here, right? So usually you can utilize, we have what we call string literals. Hello world. And what we see here is that we are nesting this string literal inside of the double quotes. That's why we're using the single quotes here. This is my second JS example. Let's go back here. We can change HTML content with the use of JavaScript. So if I try to click this, now you'll see we were able to utilize JavaScript, inline JavaScript, using an on-click attribute with the value of us trying to access the document object model, or the document, the whole document that we have here, the second.html. And we were able to go and get a reference to that. Oops, I accidentally closed that. Let me just go back here and open that up. You can try to open it up this way, guys, using code dot here. Sorry for that. Let's go back here and let me just close some of my terminals here. Now let's start to go and let's so we have our images, second.html. Go back here. Let's go back here, and now, so that's one thing to take note of when we're using JavaScript. We can replace content using JavaScript. Okay, let's have another example here. We can actually try to, in here, we can try to access the images that we have. So here we can change HTML content, this one. We can also change HTML attributes. Let's have h2. We can change HTML content with the use of JavaScript. We can also, let me have an HR here. And let's have that here. Let's have another h2. We can change HTML attributes with the use of JavaScript. Let's have an example for that. Let's have a button here, and let's have another on click. Let's just go get this. Type button. We would want to target our JS img here, and we want to change the attribute source of an image, and we would want to have some way for us to access our image. So probably we'll need to have a path here, guys. Let me first refresh this. And we're having some problem here. That's because we closed this earlier, so we'll need to have open our live server again. More examples. Okay, let's have second and third example. Just let's have here our, we can change HTML attributes with the use of JavaScript. Let's have some change HTML attribute. So when we refer to attributes in HTML, we do have the type attribute, the on-click attribute, we have the ID attribute. So that's what we're trying to pertain here. Element content, on the other hand, will be anything between the opening tag and the closing tag. Okay, So we do have here image jest. We have images. We might need to make sure that we're getting to access the, let's have a bulb of that png, and let's have two button here. We'll try to test this out, guys, because sometimes I make mistakes with what we call relative paths and absolute paths. So basically, absolute paths is you getting the whole path, and there are some ways for you to try to access some resources in your site using both relative and absolute paths. So here in this example, we are trying to access our images bulb off and bulb on. Let's try to have the on here. Let's say turn on, and let's have a turn off button here. Oh, what happened there? We just want to have this turn off. Okay, so we have a turn on, turn off. Let's have an image that we would want to access. So we'll use the image element, and we have that sourced. So this is just image that we want to access here. So let's first have a base image. Let's have that bulb on. So you would see IntelliSense is telling us that this is the file path that we can try to use for us to be able to get this or to get, for us to be able to get the image. We have this file path for the bulb on image, which is located on the images folder. So for example, we have the image in the root directory. That is this directory from where we have all of the files. So that's usually what we call the root directory, especially where we put our index.html file. Usually that's what we call the root directory. You can just use the name of the file of the image. There's also where you will be so this is the root of the current directory, web directory. If, for example, we have another folder from where this is nested, we will be using this relative path syntax here. Most of the time, I normally don't try to memorize this. Keep in mind, I just do testing most of the time if I wanted to try. So you see, we now have that image being displayed, but it's a little too big. And reading documentation is really one of the things that I would recommend. If you're a beginner, I would highly sorry, I just saw your chat right now. I'm actually just trying to work on some JavaScript exercises for today. How are you, John? So I'm just actually working on some JavaScript exercises for today. So let's just go back here. Let's just try to work on this exercise. So as I mentioned, guys, you don't really need to memorize all of this. Learning a programming language will normally be like you using the English language, right? We don't need to be memorizing everything. We just need to first learn that something exists, a syntax, a rule, and usually what I tell students when I'm trying to teach programming to some of my students is that I tell them that you have to know something exists first. I use the CURA acronym. You have to know that it exists. This is actually my personal acronym when it comes to learning. Know, understand, remember. For you to be able to retain the information, you need to apply it, right? So CURA, it's Kure. Usually it's Qura. So know that it exists. Understand how it works, and remember through repetition. So that's why I usually build my projects repeatedly from time to time. Remember through repetition. And apply in real projects, right? Whatever you're doing. So similar with the English language, we need to know that a word exists, right? Understand how you can use it in a sentence. Then remember through repetition and by using it in an actual conversation, right? So that's a personal acronym that I have that I usually share. So now let's try to go and we have that image. We need to, let's say, let's have a bulb images. So let's have those bulb images here. I'm still recovering from losing my voice for 2 weeks now, and luckily it's getting better now. Let's set our image here. Let's give it a width of, let's target a width property. Let's just give it a sorry, style. I think we can use with image rather than 100 pixels. So there we go. We now have that image being displayed, right? So now let's try to go and make this dynamic. So we have that image. Perhaps let me just push this on our terminal. Set up. Let's see what did we do first. Or git status for us to check whatever changes we have done. So we included the images folder. We have the second.html. We set up our second example, and we have our third example here. That will be having the content and the attributes. We can change the content and the attributes. And now let's have to go and usually if you want to check logs, you'll find here whatever using the git log command, right? So perhaps we can have a discussion about that in some future stream that we have. Now we have our images here, and we want to get it reference to the ID of our image. We just want to set this up first. And we have to have that bulb on. We would want to have here bulb on, bulb off, right? and we have that ID reference. We do have that JS image reference name. So let's have to go and set that up here. Now let's see what will happen if we try to click turn off. Now we have our turn on, turn off attributes working for us. Okay, what's happening here if we try to inspect our element is that we try to click on turn on. You'll see we're able to change the attributes of the image using the inline script that we've created inside of our button attribute, on click attribute. Okay, so if I click on turn on, you'll see it's dynamically changing the bulb on PNG, and it's replacing the attribute source attribute that we are accessing on our document object. And we can see we're nesting a method. We have a method get element by id .js image, which is referencing this image element that contains the bulb on PNG as a default image being displayed on our browser. And we're referencing this unique identifier, which is the JS image value of the ID attribute. And we're assigning a new value to it by accessing it using the property accessory operator, which is the period and the source attribute that we have in our image element. And then we're using a relative path here for us to be able to access the folder from where we stored our images, which is the bulb off and the bulb on. Okay, so that's what's currently happening in the background. So bulb on, bulb off. So we were able to make this work. So we can change attributes and we can change HTML content with the use of JavaScript. So let's commit this change. So at least we'll have git add all, git commit -m, add change content and attribute examples. Okay. Now let's talk about JavaScript variables. Let's have JS variables. Let's close this. Let's create a new file. Let me just click here. So I think much better if we call this first.js, and that will be containing our comments, right? Let's have a just a variable declarations.js. So I hope that that's something that you got to understand, guys. By the way, we can also change HTML fonts styles. So I think we can try to continue here just to showcase that we can also replace HTML styles in JavaScript before we work with let's just work some more examples here. So we can change HTML attributes, we can change HTML content with the use of JavaScript. We can also change styles or CSS styles. JavaScript here. Let's just open a new tab here, Google Fonts. Let's look for something interesting. We can use Rubik's. I've actually used that in one of my projects. Let's try to look for some stylings here just to add some fun styles to our project. This is a new font. Just want to this looks so if you want to add some Google fonts, so it has that regular font, right? Let's see what this will look. We can just copy all of this and go to our second.html here. Or there we go. Then let's have a style tag nested. We'll need to copy the font family Titan 1. We can also try to add this Titan 1 here to our so to go to our let's have font families here. What happened there? Alright, let me go put that in our readme file. Google font. And let me just copy that font family in our second.html here. What did I do wrong here? We need to have that body element inside of that. Okay, now let's go try to go back here. So we now have that as an example. Let's have some color. Let's try to target the color attribute or the style for our color here. So to have another button, let's have this button here. Then let's go get the let's try to test out how this will work. Will this work if we change the color to yellow and then we use the style that color attribute CSS property, and I would want to have a target which is the body element, get element by ID. So let's put here an ID. Let's see if that worked. Get element by ID. I think that's not working for us. So what do we need to do here? think we can use get element by class name. I think we'll use tag name here. There's that tag name method body rather than ID. Let's have that ID remove. And let's try to see if this will work. Can we try to access the style that color? I think we don't need to. How to replace, let me just check some examples here, guys. We are targeting the color attribute. Just close some tabs here. We we need to have that style. Let's see. Let's replace this with click me. Just to differentiate. Let's have open with live server. I think that's because we're not able to. Let's target the H2 here. Let's try to first target. Let's see if this will work. Font sized. Let's have our body. Or let's have an ID here. JS can change the style of, rather than targeting the let's have an ID. Change style. Let's call it change style. Let's have an ID here. Change it element by ID. Let's have change style. Let's first try to see what's the current default value of our. Let's close some tabs here. Change style of elements using JS. Let's see here. What's our default value for the font style? So our paragraph element here should have a font style of 16 pixels, right? Let's try to replace that with, let's close this for a while, 20 pixels. And let's see if that will work. So we have that 16 pixels right now. If I try to click this, that's not working. So what did I do wrong here? We have our button. On click get element by ID. So you would see we're encountering some errors because I'm making some typographical error here. And you'll see we were able to change the styles of the element, right? It became 20 pixels now. So if I try to refresh this, that's 16 pixels. If I click it, it became 20 pixels. Let's make it a little bit larger just to showcase that this will be possible. Let's have 50 pixels. And if you try to click here, now we were able to replace the styles, and you would see we have that. I'm clicking everywhere. 50 pixels value. Once we try to click here, it became 50 pixels. Okay, so that's something that we can try to do again. I'm just wondering how we can change the color. Let's see. Let's change style. I'm sure there's a way to do this. We just need to look for it. And let's have this to yellow. But turn me to yellow. Okay, so that's working. And let's try to target the body element. I'm sure there's a way to do this, guys. That's why I'm get element by tag name. We want to change the body color, background color. Let's say, let's have background color. That's what I wanted to do earlier. So that's working. Let's just try to do some testing here. This button, where is this? Document get elements by tag name. How do we get element? Well, let's just give our body element ID. Usually you can do some changes here. Then let's try to replace this to this. Okay, so that's working. So you would see we're using camel case if we want to refer to the property. Just take note, guys. So what we had to do is to, rather than by tag name, I think it was much easier to call it by ID. Because if I try to refresh this, you would see it returns back. For testing purposes, that's a good way. We can try to do that. Let's give our body element an ID. Then let's try to go and try to refresh this now. Let's close this. Turn the background color. Turn the body background color to yellow. Turn the paragraph text color to yellow or blue. Let's replace this with blue. I think that's not going to be good for our eyesight here. So we have JS can change the style of elements using JS. Turn the body background color to yellow, and you would see what will be a good. Yes, we have our turn on here. Let's see. Good color combination for yellow as a background. I'm just going to check. blue here, and then let's have this as yellow. To blue. Just to test things out, right? Okay, so that's there. And yes, can change the style of elements using JS styles. Can we try to also have another button here just for us to be able to this is what did not happen earlier. I want to have the text to yellow in general. Background text color to blue or yellow. Let's have this. Red or green perhaps. Let's have this to green. Let's close this just to so we're targeting the background color for the we were able to turn it to green, we were able to turn this to blue. Okay, so we can do those things as HTML styles. We can also hide some HTML elements using JavaScript. So if we try to work on hiding, let's say we would want to have an element. Let's have another HR here. We can hide HTML elements using JS. Let's have another demonstration here. Let's say I would want to have an image sourced, and or let's say we would want to have a free image. Let's try to look for a free image cartoon. Found this free image on the web from FreePic. Are there any attributions that we need? Attribution is required. How to attribute? We'll need to have some sort of copy image by. Okay, so this will have that alternate text, and we want to get the I went to FreePic here, so I'm just going to copy image link. Let's see if this will work for us. Let's open up our project. There we go, we have that image there, right? We can hide HTML elements using JavaScript. Let's try to set the 7 ID here. FreePic astronaut. Is that the correct spelling for astronaut? N-A-U-T. So let's have that FreePic astronaut. And let's target the ID. And let's call that width of 100 pixels. Okay, so we have that FreePic hide HTML elements using JavaScript. So this is working, this is working, this is working. Now we want to hide this image. Let's try to hide that by using the document. Let's try to have a button here. And what we want to do here is rather than let's have a change style by ID, FreePic astronaut style dot display property, and let's have that to none. So if we try to go back to our example, let me just close this and let's have another. Where's our example here? Let's refresh this. Spec element, let's see the display property of this object. Usually we can go to layout. Display is inline, right? We can actually replace that with we have the, you'll see the display property can be block, and it moves that that image element, and it occupied the whole space. If we add background color blue, I think that will not be working because we only have our, I think we need to have a container for this. But just have that in mind, it's inline, that's why the button here and that is showing up. Let's have to refresh this. This is working. This is working. We have our replace that. These are working, and if we try to, now we were able to hide the HTML element using the display none property for CSS. So let's commit this. Let's just update our if we want, let's, by the way, let's try to replace this to hide. We want to have this show, and as I've mentioned earlier, we can try to set here to block, and if we try to resave this, we want to hide it, we want to show it, and now it's in display block, right? Hide, show. So these are working. Our JavaScript is now working for us. We have that change HTML content. I think let's try to change the green to red so that we can make it a little bit stand out. We are able to change the content. We are able to change attributes. We are able to change styles. We can change color. We can change color, background color, text. We can even hide and show our image here. So that's for our exercise for some of the basics of things that we can do with JavaScript, right? So let's update. Let me just update second, add more examples for changing style and style, hiding, showing elements, and create var declarations.js. This is a bit long. When you're creating a commit message, it should be short, but I'm just trying to, at least we'll have some sort of way to see that on our repository. If I go back to my repository here now, try to refresh this, so you would see we have that commit changes, and we have that variable declaration. We have our second HTML file here, and it has those changes added to our exercises here. So perhaps that's it for the meantime. At least we were able to cover some exercises with JavaScript. So thank you everyone, and I'll just be ending our stream for tonight or for today.